India has just had its general elections. Narendra Modi has won a third term. But it seems that this will be without an overall majority. So how will the political landscape change? And what is the history of these huge electoral operations in India itself? Is India too big to be a democracy? How does a voter engage with the authorities? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Modi! India's ruling coalition, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, won the majority of seats in India's general parliamentary election. Nonetheless, in an unexpected development, the result itself was far from reaching the predicted landslide for the ruling alliance. In one of his party's main slogans, Modi set forth the goal of securing over 400 parliamentary seats. However, his alliance was able to attain victory in only about 290 constituencies. Unlike the last two elections, the alliance had to pass the 272 majority threshold in the 543-seat lower house of parliament. Modi's party itself won just 240 seats, compared to 303 from the last election in 2019. The smaller-than-expected mandate means Modi will have to rely more on his regional allies for political support than during his previous terms. Modi campaigned on India's rapid economic expansion and growing international position, and sought to frame his messaging in order to appeal to the Hindu majority. However, analysts point to problems like the unemployment crisis or high inflation as being the more important issues for a significant share of voters. According to experts, even if Modi's coalition manages to form a government, these elections are a personal defeat for the Prime Minister, since his party has made him and his leadership the main argument of the campaign. Many feel, both in India and elsewhere, that he bears personal responsibility for his party's election results. Political scientists claim that this is uncharted territory for Modi's Indian People's Party, which faces two choices: either champion the art of political reconciliation or descend on the path of autocracy. Only the future will tell what path the Prime Minister will take, a choice that will simultaneously determine India's international diplomatic position and its trajectory.
I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Dr. Krzysztof Iwanek from the Institute of Eastern Studies Foundation. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Let's have an overview of the current elections, the structure and the results. A gigantic operation, nearly 1 billion voters. How does India organise this massive election?
So that was a long process, because the election was organized in 7 phases spanning across 7 weeks, in the sense that the elections were being held every Saturday. And one of the main reasons for this is that the security forces need to be shifted to secure elections in one region and then the other, and the electoral voting machines are being sealed after that one phase and then the next, and then they are all opened on the same day. So the opening and counting day was June 4th, which was yesterday as we speak. And then the votes were counted in nearly 24 hours or so on that day. So altogether, that way it was managed well, I think.
Is this a process that started in the 1950s, but did it achieve its final form in the process of evolution, or did it start off like it's continuing to do today?
I would say the main elements of the Indian electoral system are the same as they were in 1950s. In the British period, let's say that there were like small beginnings of democracy, but only a small fraction of Indian society had a franchise and could vote. While in 1950s, every adult was given a right to vote. And ever since the British period, the system was based on first past the post system. That didn't change. As well as the fact that India, ever since 1950s, is a federation. So what we had now were mostly national elections, but we also have state elections. So all of these haven't changed ever since the beginning of the Republic of India.
Well, you mentioned the British period, and they kicked out the British in 1947. Why have democracy anyway in the first place? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, my kind of general point would be that limited democracy as it was introduced in the British period was mostly as a way of stepping back from the Indian position. I mean, giving them a part of a cake so that they would rebel less, which didn't work eventually. And it was only after 1947, after the British left, that democracy became to be like the spirit of Indian politics in earnest, not just a way to placate the certain groups, but something for all to have. And
the spirit of a new nation, a new state.
I think it's quite a huge success, because if you look, across post-colonial Asia, hardly any state achieved, like true democracy, especially amongst the post-colonial Asian states that haven't been pro-Western, haven't been supported by the US, and India wasn't. So that way it was a huge success. India, unlike, for example, Pakistan, its, let's say, sister state, historically speaking, did have a working democracy throughout that period since 1947, apart from 2 years of emergency in 1970s.
Yes, and the Indian independence was characterized by lots of bloodletting between Muslims and Hindus, and geographical frictions. Let's come back up to today. Prime Minister Modi, third term, slightly reduced, perhaps a greatly reduced working majority. Why did this happen? Was it a defeat for him, or a victory for opposition parties? How do you characterise today's the recent election results?
It was still a victory in the sense that Modi's party, the BJP, the coalition around it will hold a majority. But yes, it's a greatly reduced victory. I think one of the things that happened is that, in a way, the India's ruling party, the BJP, started to live in a sort of an echo chamber where they are really experts on promoting themselves, and that's something it needs to be done in politics, right? But it has achieved, I think, a level in which they themselves became like the victims of their own propaganda, because they kept claiming that they will over 400 seats in the House of 543.
That was the slogan that they went to.
Yes, and they ended up with 240. So first things first is that I think they need to, rethink how they present themselves and how they think of themselves. For example, most of the exit polls were wrong. They gave them the BJP a much clearer victory than what the BJP gained. But most of those exit polls were solicited by private TV networks that are mostly pro-BJP. Okay. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which was then verified by the actual election results. And then I think the economy, to Modi's credit, he really was trying hard, and he did have some achievements in achieving greater economic progress. However, apparently not to the level that was necessary. Well,
that's right. Why? If elections are about the economy, as all elections seem to be, why did he receive a reduced vote?
Elections were just held recently, so possibly we should wait for more cold analysis. But so far, it seems that in very populous states like Uttar Pradesh, which has more than 200 million people, there is still rampant unemployment. And despite that, boasting tone of the ruling party, they haven't been able to produce, to conjure up the right amount of jobs, especially for the youth and in the rural areas. And Uttar Pradesh is one of the states which didn't vote for them so much as it was expected.
What kind of economic benefits could he give to states like Uttar Pradesh?
That's
when you say jobs, how do you provide jobs to a couple of 100 million people?
I think Modi is trying to do exactly this, and I think in concept, at least, he had the right approach. I mean, his policy was, and I believe is still called "Make in India," and it's basically based on the idea to attract foreign direct investment, especially in the heavy industry, so that you have, large manufacturing units, and then with India's demographics being mostly focused, based in rural areas, you expect those people that work in agriculture to gradually shift to the cities, where there are not enough jobs for them. So, yes, heavy industry would be a sector which could, sorry to use this word, kind of suck in those masses. And Modi was trying to do this for the last 10 years. But I think the problem was that he wasn't able to attract the right amount of FDI, and not enough, such large manufacturing units were created, and thus not enough jobs were created too. I think one of the main problems are still corruption and infrastructure and instability. All of this, I think, makes many foreign investors, wary, concerned about investing in India.
Will they get their money back? How does this affect the political landscape of India? We talked briefly before we came on air about he's going to have to try and buy more regional party votes, and the opposition Congress Party is going to try and do the same. Is that going to be India turning in on itself before it gets a stable government with all these negotiations?
It would seem that Modi will form the next government, so there will be no change that way. But the major change is that Modi and his party, the BJP, will not hold majority by themselves. They are short, I think, a good 32 seats below majority, and those seats are being provided by regional parties. So those parties will demand certain concessions. These are two main parties that are the allies of the BJP, the GDU from Bihar and the TDP from Andhra Pradesh. So these two states will get special treatment. And one of the main issues for Modi will now be that all major reforms, including economic reforms that he would like to undertake, will have to be, accepted by those allies, which was something that he didn't have to always face throughout the last 10 years.
Is he that sort of a person or that sort of man who can negotiate deals, or is he a very kind of princely kind of leader?
The BJP as such was seen as a bit, heavy-handed for the last decade with how it dealt with allies. Many of the regional allies left the party, but now they will just have to negotiate. I mean, otherwise they control.
Okay, moving on to the international arena, how does this affect India's confidence as a regional superpower? It's building up its army, and especially its navy, the aircraft carriers, to project its influence in the South China Oceans. How does that signal, do the election results signal any major change, or is it going to be more of the same?
No, I don't think there will be a change there, because even though the BJP and Modi depend on those regional allies, most of India's regional parties don't really have much of a stake in Indian foreign policy. They usually leave this to the national parties, those leading in the coalitions. And Indian foreign policy is one of those aspects of Indian politics that remains rather stable across governments and coalitions. So I still think that whatever happened domestically, India will be trying to, first of all, focus on its neighborhood and focus on containing Chinese influence in its neighborhood. I don't think that will change.
And so the policy is make India great again, and that's a kind of accepted version of India in the 21st century.
It is, though, that the question is how to do this and how long it will take. So it all seems to start with economy. So first of all, more investment and more jobs. With this, even those grand plans of building new aircraft carriers and so on, and being a country that could stand up to China, that can't be fulfilled without meaningfully reforming the economy.
When you say, as we draw to a conclusion now, when you say standing up to China, what does that mean in concrete terms? Is it the Himalayan border, or is it a maritime threat?
Both things, I think. So what we saw in 2020 was China taking away a small chunk of Indian territory in the Himalayas.
The two forces came to blows, didn't
yes.
they? On
Yes. So one of the So one of the major goals for Modi as he begins his third term would be not to allow such a thing to happen again. So to push back against Chinese inroads in the Himalayas, and similarly to push back against Chinese inroads into the Indian Ocean around India. That would be the two main, let's say, security and foreign policy related objectives for Modi.
In the 1960s, there was a kind of an artillery duel over that disputed border. Is there is that an accepted form of policy making in the Himalayas? Do both military staffs say, okay, well, these frictions, these contacts are going to happen anyway?
Not anymore, thankfully, in the sense that since early 1990s, India and China do have bilateral checks and balances in place, so they have certain protocols to follow, and their soldiers are not allowed to shoot at each other. So there are many skirmishes on this disputed boundary continuously, but they do not, and they are sometimes bloody, but they do not involve firearms. So as long as this is in place, we hopefully won't get a war between India and China.
That's all we have time for. So Dr. Iwanek, thank you very much for coming on to our programme.
Thank you for inviting me.
Do join us again for How We Got Here.